discussing on what an unconventional monetary policy tool is, its implication, its effectiveness, and its impact on the economy. My name is Pemonchu, and today I'll be your moderator for this panel discussion. So, as the global economy continues to face unpredictable challenges, central banks have increasingly relied on the unconventional monetary policy tools. And today we'll be mainly focusing on the three major tools, that is quantitative easing, negative interest rates, and the forward guidance. So today we'll be hearing from various perspectives, and we'll be analyzing the real world applications and its effectiveness. Let's begin with a brief introduction from each panelist, including their area of expertise and initial stand for today's discussion. Firstly, we have Mr. Karl Monchu, who is currently serving as the economist for the European Central Bank.
Thank you, moderator. At the European Central Bank, I work on asset purchase program and microeconomic analysis during the European post-crisis recovery. I look forward to discuss the degree of quantitative easing.
Next, we have Professor Gil Tenzin, who is currently a research advisor for the Federal Reserve.
Thank you, moderator, for the introduction. My field mainly focuses on the US monetary tool that is used during the COVID pandemic in US, which mainly particularly focuses on the quantitative easing and the forward guidance. Then I'm here to explore how these tools it supports or it shapes the market and the policy.
And lastly, we have Mr. Samson, who is a policy advisor for the Asian Development Bank.
Thank you, moderator, for such opportunities. And I'm currently serving as a financial advisor at Asian Development Bank. And my main role there is to guide and support the underdeveloping countries to achieve their developmental goals.
To give a kickstart to our conversation, so let's start with the basics. So, Mr. Kalmochu, can you explain the mechanisms of how the quantitative easing works and why especially the European Central Bank used it instead of the traditional rate hikes?
Quantitative easing required large-scale purchase of government and corporate bond. Here, the main goal is to inject liquidity in the economy at lower long-term interest rate and stimulate borrowing. Therefore, quantitative easing helps push inflation upward. Importantly, quantitative easing is not the same as printing money. It is an exchange of financial assets.
Thanks so much, sir, for your wonderful insight. So next, my question is to Mr. Pilden. So, Professor, can you tell us what are some of the specific short-term gains and long-term challenges from the quantitative easing?
Thank you, moderator, for the questions. So to answer your queries, in a short period of time, the borrowing cost in Southern Europe it dropped drastically, where Italy's 10 years borrowing yield it fell from 6 to 7% in the year 2011 to 2012 to 2% in the year 2016. Spain, they also saw a similar relief, where their yield dropping from the crisis peak of 7% to under 2%, which led the Spain and Italy's investor confidence to grow. However, in a long term, the quantitative easing inflated the asset price, which raised the equality concerns. Critics they argues that the government may delay the reforms, relying on the cheap borrowage. Due to that, the both countries, that is Spain and Italy, they faced a challenges that their high debt to GDP ratio made them vulnerable when the monetary policy eventually turned to normalize.
Thank you so much, Professor, for sharing your viewpoints. So next, I'd like to hear from Mr. Samson. So, Mr. Samson, can you tell us how does the European Central Bank manages the risks of market distortion or the overdependence on the quantitative easing?
Thank you, moderator, for the question. And it is because the European Central Bank mitigates its market distortions and our reliance on the quantitative easing through safeguard and strict policy limits, and it maintains the market neutrality by purchasing the broader amount of assets from the secondary market, and as far as possible they try to ignore the government direct financing. And one thing is European Central Bank possesses a market cap on how much they can hold from issuer, reducing the over exposures, and the forward guidance helps to shape the market expectations and ensures gradual tightening of asset purchases. And quantitative easing is also complemented by targeted lending tools and together these measures promote economic stability while minimizing the long-term reliance on extraordinary monetary interventions.
Thanks so much once again to all the esteemed panelists. So with this we come to an end for the first segment. Now let's start with the core idea of this discussion and let's try to heat up our conversation. During COVID-19, the Federal Reserve went beyond the quantitative easing and started buying the corporate bonds. So Mr. Karmal, can you tell us how did they differ and why was it necessary?
While the quantitative easing traditionally targeted government treasurers and mortgage-backed security to influence both monetary condition, the Federal Reserve corporate bond purchase program served a radically different crisis management function. These facilities were specially designed to restore liquidity and confidence in frozen corporate credit market. During the acute financial stress, when investment credit companies suddenly found themselves unable to assist debt financing, the Fed intervention signaled institutional confidence, effectively narrowing credit spread and restoring market trust before purchase even began.
And what about the forward guidance? Was it effective or did it risk the credibility of the Federal Reserve?
Truly, forward guidance was the key in encoding the expectation. The Fed's forward guidance was highly effective in keeping the long-term rate low, preventing the premature market tightening that could have disrupted economic growth. However, the credibility cost was significant. The transitory inflation messaging in the year 2021 to 2022 damaged the Fed's credibility when the inflation surged about 6%. So the market started pricing the rate hikes before the Fed even signaled them. They shift towards a more conditional, data-dependent language, though this sometimes left the market uncertain about what the Fed's actual reaction functions. The truth, it works best when the condition matches the expectation. However, risks looks ineffective and dishonest if they don't. That's all.
But some of the economists and various school of thought says that the Federal Reserve was responsible for fueling the asset bubbles. So what to say on this?
Well, I should say that it's a valid concern that the Federal's actions may contribute to the asset bubbles because by slashing the interest rate up to the near zero and injecting a massive liquidity into the financial system through asset purchases, this made borrowing much cheaper and even encouraged investment in the riskier assets. And this led to a sharp increase in stock prices, real estate values, and even speculative investments like cryptocurrencies. While this action stabilized the economy and prevent a deeper financial crisis, they also created an environment where asset price rose faster than the economic fundamentals. However, it is important to note that the Federal's priority during the crisis is to restore the market functions and confidence. And the deeper issue is not the use of these tools, but the lack of accompanying macroprudential regulations to mitigate the emerging risks. And in future, I think that the monetary policy should complement to ensure a long-term stability of the Federal's nation.
Thanks so much, panelists, for sharing your perspectives. So it was really insightful. Now let us proceed with our questions and answers. So the negative interest rate, its main objective is to stimulate the economic activities by encouraging the saving and investment. However, some of the critics argue that the negative interest rate punishes the savers and moreover it distorts the financial market. So how do the central bank balance these downsides with their objectives?
Central bank is working on a fine line. In the European Central Bank's case, it implies a tried system where only a portion of bank reserve were charged on negative rate. The soften the blow on bank and try to maintain lending intensive. However, bank must monitor side effects, especially on the insurance and the banking company. Long-term low or negative rate erodes saving, which impact consumption behavior.
And similarly with the quantitative easing, So the quantitative easing often leads to a higher asset price, and some argue that it increases the income inequality. So what's your perspective on this? So if you can just share your opinion.
Thank you for the questions. Quantitative easing, it does widen the wealth inequalities, and this is the real problem. When central bank like Fed they uses this quantitative easing, they pump money into the economy by buying assets like loans. This makes the stock and the house price goes up. But here's the catch: real people they own most of the assets, so they get most of the benefit. While the regular workers might eventually get a job from economic boost, but their wages don't goes up as fast as the asset price. The Fed they have acknowledged these equity concerns. More inclusive monetary policy now involves the data on the employment across the income groups, gender and races. But at its core, the monetary policy still relies on the financial market as a transmission channel, which inherently favors those who have already invested.
Thanks so much. Indeed, it was a really good response. Now let us go deeper into the global implications. So, how do the unconventional monetary policy tools in developed economies like the US impacts the emerging markets?
I think large capital flows into the emerging market in pursuit of a greater return can be triggered by unconventional monetary policies such as quantitative easing. And in those nations, this frequently results in inflation, asset bubbles, and currency appreciation. The reversal of such flows, which is frequently referred to as a taper tantrum, can then destabilize those economies when Fed begins tightening. Thus, communication and collaboration are essential, and the hazard of spillovers must be recognized by those advanced economies.
So with this response, I think we are almost nearing end to this insightful panel discussion. So my next question is directly to Mr. Kamoj. So Bhutan being one of the country who really considers the climatic changes, environmental conservation. So my question is, could the unconventional monetary policy tools used to support the broader goals like the green investment and climate stability?
The evolving role of the central bank in addressing climate change, particularly highlighting the European Central Bank initiative to prioritize bonds from companies with low carbon emission. This approach aligns monetary policy with European Union's goal, but raises ethical question about whether the central bank should remain neutral in market or adopt more reforms. Balancing climate responsibility with credibility is a significant challenge as they navigate this role in changing economic landscape. This reflects broader societal debate about the responsibility of financial institutions in promoting sustainable development and implementing or integrating climate consideration in monetary policy.
So with this response, we can understand that Bhutan can learn or Bhutan can adapt from the well-developed economies like the European countries. So now moving on to the next question. So Mr. Gildensen, it is said that exiting from the unconventional monetary policy tools once it is being applied, it says that it poses very huge challenges to the central bank. So what's your take on this?
Exiting unconventional monetary policy is challenging. Why? Because the market they become too dependent on the support that is provided by the central bank. When policymakers, when they try to withdraw these measures, it often triggers the instability in the economy. As seen during the 2013, the taper tantrum, when a mere talk of reducing the stimulus, it caused the market to run. Japan's experience, it further illustrates this difficulty, where even a modest attempt by the Bank of Japan, that is central bank, to try to normalize policy had frequently disrupted the market and the forced reversal. The key problem lies in how the financial system they adapt to successfully exit UNPs. Central bank must proceed gradually, communicate their plans clearly in every stage, and be prepared to manage a potential market overreaction. This careful approach is necessary because once an extensive market interventions are implemented unwittingly, then without causing economic disruption, requires a precise timing and a transparent guidance.
So from this, I think we can understand that implying a gradual exit strategy is necessary because the sudden exit can disrupt the financial market. So if I just add on what Mr. Killinson had already said, so what will happen if the central bank keep on using the unconventional monetary policy tools for too long?
There are a number of hazards associated with the central bank using the unconventional monetary policy tools for an extended period of time, like asset purchases and prolonged low interest rates have the potentials to skew asset values, exceed financial bubbles, and to promote excessive risk takings. And these policies lose their effectiveness over the time, and the bank and pension funds struggles to be profitable. The distinctions between fiscal and monetary policy may become more hazy if unconventional monetary policy tools are used infinitely, which raise questions regarding the central bank's independence and debt monetizations. Furthermore, the unconventional monetary policies have potentials to exacerbate inequalities and increase the volatility of policy exit, which could lead to inflation or a recession.
Oh, so this means that the unconventional monetary policy tools is like the sides of a coin, coming with both advantage and the disadvantages. Now let us jump into the next question. So Japan have adopted the negative interest rate in around 2016. So how did this affect the consumer behavior and the bank lending?
Initially, the Bank of Japan has negative impact rate policy aimed to penalize bank for parking excess reserve, encouraging increased lending to stimulate economic activity. However, consumer rate proved mixed with some increasing spending while others saved more due to economic uncertainty. Banks, particularly with small regional institutions, experienced significant profitability decline, generating real criticism of unconventional monetary policy approach.
Obviously, and moreover, Japan had been a long-term user of negative interest rates. And so, Professor, could you reflect on the unique challenges and lessons from the Japan's experience with these tools?
So Japan's introduced the negative interest rate in the 2016, as already stated, which charged the bank for the excess reserve to push them towards more lending. So in parallel, that the YCC, that is a yield curve control, was introduced to cap the 10 years bond yield near zero. While the YCC, they kept the financing cost low and stable, it severely impacted the bank's profitability, especially to the regional standard. Moreover, the prolonged low rates have exhausted the Bank of Japan's policy toolbox. The Japan's case underscored a vital lesson, that is, unconventional tools can stabilize but not review the economies while they lack the demand and the structural reforms.
So, adding on what Professor have just said, given the Japan's aging population and stagnation, is monetary policy enough?
Honestly, no, because unconventional monetary policy have their own limitations, and without the fiscal reforms, labor productivity growth, and demographics, monetary policy tools can only delay but not solve the underlying economic crisis.
Thanks so much to all the panelists. Now I'd like to open the floor briefly. So, Professor, do you see parallels between the European Central Bank's experience and what Mr. Karma have shared about the US corporate bond purchases?
Certainly, both show central banks stepping stone into a non-traditional market, that is a modern market. It is a fine, a stimulating without a distorting stance. The key difference is just that a Fed's direct engagement with the corporate credit, which the European Central Bank tries to avoid. That's all.
To add up on Professor Killen's point, I also think that it reflects a legal constraint, but it also raises a question about how far central banks should go before crossing the line into fiscal territory.
Once again, thank you so much to all the panelists for this diverse and thoughtful perspective. With this, we come to an end of this interesting and insightful discussion. As we wrap up, let's reflect on what we've learned. So today we explored the nature and impact of three major unconventional monetary policy tools. That is, firstly, the quantitative easing, which boosts the liquidity but risks the inflating asset bubbles. Secondly, the negative interest rates, which stimulate lending, investment, and boost the economic activity, but it may harm the bank's profitability and the depositors. Lastly, the forward guidance, which manages the expectation but relies heavily on the central bank's credibility. To leave our viewers with the thought for the day, central bank continues to innovate with the unconventional monetary policy tools, but as we look in the future, we must ask ourselves, which of these tools will truly shape the future of the economic stability? And thank you so much to all the viewers for joining this crucial discussion, and see you next time.